Let me start by asking you something very simple, and I want you to really think about it, not just answer quickly in your head. If alcohol is something you truly want to stop or reduce, why does it feel like it has such a hold on you? Not all the time, not in every moment, but in certain moments, it almost feels automatic, like there's a switch that gets flipped inside of you. Stress hits, and something inside says, drink. Your day gets too much, and something inside says, drink. You feel overwhelmed, anxious, bored, stressed, lonely, and something inside you tells you to drink. And I want you to understand right at the very beginning of this, something very important. You are not weak, you are not lacking discipline, and you are definitely not broken. What you are experiencing is a learned brain adaptation, and that is completely different, because anything that is learned can be unlearned. Now, I know that might go against everything you've ever been told, because for years, addiction has been described as a disease, not by neuroscientists, but by mainstream recovery. Something permanent, something you must manage, something you fight, something you label yourself with for life. But I want to offer you a different perspective today, not as a motivational idea, not as a belief system, but as a brain-based explanation for what's really going on. It's a combination of 3 systems working together: subconscious beliefs, neural pathways, and nervous system regulation patterns. That's it. And when those 3 systems align in a certain way, your brain learns a very powerful message. Alcohol equals solution. Alcohol equals relief. Alcohol equals escape. Alcohol equals reward. And once the brain learns a solution, it repeats it. Not because it's trying to sabotage you, but because your brain has one primary job: keep you alive, to push you towards things that bring you more pleasure, and to move you away from things that cause you pain, to reduce uncertainty, to repeat what has worked before, even if what it thinks is helpful is actually hurting you. So today I'm going to show you something very different from traditional recovery. I'm not going to ask you to use more willpower. I'm not going to tell you just to push through cravings, and I'm definitely not going to tell you that you're powerless. Instead, I'm going to show you how the system itself is built so that you can finally understand why you feel the way you feel, and more importantly, how that begins to change. Because once you understand the system, you stop fighting yourself blindly, and you start working with your brain instead of against it. Now, before I go deeper, I want to tell you something personal, because I don't want you to think this is just theory. I didn't arrive at this understanding from reading a few books and creating a framework. For starters, I lived it. For 25 years, I drank every day. I lived with my partner, now husband, who was also stuck in the addiction loop. I struggled with anxiety, ADHD, depression, and codependency. I tried to quit more times than I can count. And when nothing worked, I got curious. I began asking questions. I began studying. And I got sober. Not by using more willpower, not by white-knuckling it, but by reprogramming my subconscious mind and implementing practical tools that I designed after everything I'd learned. For the last 9 years, I've been studying addiction, patterns, behavioural loops, emotional triggers, relapse cycles, and the neuroscience behind habit formation, the psychology, and the science behind human behaviour. But more importantly, as I started to work with clients, I noticed the same pattern repeating over and over again. People who desperately wanted to change, people who were intelligent, who were self-aware, people who had tried everything: rehab, AA, medication, support groups, white-knuckling it, moderation, taking breaks, constantly making promises to themselves. And still, they ended up back in the cycle. Not because they didn't care, but because they were trying to solve a subconscious problem using conscious effort alone. And that mismatch is the key, because your conscious mind is only a tiny part of your operating system, about 5%. It's the part of you that makes decisions, that sets goals, that says, this time I'm going to stop. But your subconscious mind is running 95% of the show. It controls 95% of your behaviours, your emotions, your thoughts. It stores patterns. It runs emotional associations. It predicts your next move before you're even aware of it. So when you say, I don't want to drink tonight, but later that night you drink anyway, that is not a character flaw. That is a system override. Your subconscious programming is simply stronger than your conscious intention. And the problem with willpower is this: willpower is conscious effort, and conscious effort burns energy. Decision fatigue is real. By the end of the day, your brain is tired from making thousands of decisions. What to eat, what to respond to, what to prioritize, what to wear, how to manage emotions. And then at that exact moment when you're most tired, your brain offers you the strongest, most rehearsed shortcut. Alcohol equals relief. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. And the brain always prefers familiar over unfamiliar, even when familiar is destructive. So today I want to start breaking something open for you, because most people never actually question the belief underneath the drinking. They think the problem is alcohol itself, or stress, or anxiety, or their personality, or their circumstances. But the real driver is not alcohol. It is what alcohol represents in your mind. Because right now, somewhere in your subconscious programming, alcohol is linked to solving something. Most likely many things. even if it creates problems afterwards. It still appears to solve something in the moment. And that in the moment relief is what keeps the loop alive. So if we're going to change this properly, we don't start by fighting alcohol. We start by changing meaning. We start by changing association. We start by changing the internal prediction system, the decisions your brain is making before the drink even happens. Because once the brain no longer predicts relief, the desire begins to collapse naturally. And that is where real freedom begins. I'm going to explain how this pattern forms, why it turns into automatic behaviour, and how neural pathways actually lock this cycle in over time, and why it feels like it gets stronger and stronger, even though you don't want it to. But before we go there, I want you to notice something. You're not sitting here listening to someone trying to shame you. You're listening to someone explain your experience in a very different way. And even if part of you is thinking, this actually makes sense, then you're already starting to see the system. And once you see the system, you can change it. Now, I want to slow this down a little bit here, because most people have never actually been shown what is happening in their brain in a way that makes sense of their real lived experience. They've been told you just need more willpower. You need to try harder. Stop putting yourself in triggering situations. You need to manage your triggers. You need to manage your cravings. But none of that actually explains why, even when you know all of that, you still find yourself repeating the same pattern. So let's break this down properly. Your brain is not random. It is not emotional chaos. It is not broken. It's a prediction system, and its entire job is to reduce effort and increase survival efficiency, which means it is constantly asking one question in the background of everything you do. What is the most likely outcome based on past experience? And then it chooses the path of least resistance. And here's where alcohol becomes powerful inside that program, because alcohol does not start as dependency, does not start as addiction. It starts as a learning experience. The first few times someone drinks, the brain is just observing. What changed after this? Did my stress reduce? Did emotions feel softer? Did boredom feel less uncomfortable? Did the internal pressure decrease? And even if the effect is temporary, even if it comes with consequences later, the brain still records one very important association. This changed my internal state quickly. And your brain loves quick change, because your nervous system is constantly trying to move you out of discomfort and back into balance. So what happens over time is very predictable. Every repeated pairing of stress, drink, emotion, drink, social discomfort, drink, anxiety, drink, boredom, drink, starts to build something inside your brain. Not a thought, not a belief, but a pathway, a neural pathway. And I want you to imagine this like a field of grass. At first it's flat, there's nothing there. But every time you walk that same path across that field, a small path starts to form. And the more you walk it, the clearer it becomes, until eventually you don't even have to think about where you're going. The path is clear and your feet just take you there. This is exactly how habits work inside your brain. Now here's the part most people miss. Once a neural pathway is strong enough, it starts to fire automatically, before conscious thought, before decision making, before awareness fully kicks in. So what you experience as, I don't know why I did it, I don't know why I drank, is actually because your brain is running a prediction-based autopilot. And this is why willpower fails, because willpower is not the system driving behaviour. It is only the observer of behaviour. So when people say, I decided not to drink, but I drank anyway, what they are actually describing is my conscious intention was overridden by my subconscious pattern. And that is not a personality flaw. That is the hierarchy of the brain. Now let's go one level deeper, because this is where real freedom starts to become possible. Every neural pathway is not just a behaviour pathway. It is also an emotional prediction pathway. What will I do? It is also predicting. What will I feel if I do this? So before you even drink, your brain is already simulating the outcome. Relief, release, escape, numbing, shifting state. And that prediction alone is enough to generate a craving. Because a craving is not desire for alcohol itself. A craving is desire for the emotional state to shift. Let me say that again, because it's so important. You are not craving alcohol. You are craving the state change that your brain believes alcohol will produce. And that belief has been learned over time. Now here is where traditional recovery approaches fail. They focus on suppressing behaviour, avoiding triggers, using coping strategies, delay urges, distract, but they never actually change the prediction system itself. So the brain still says, this works. Even if you resist it, even if you abstain, even if you white knuckle it, the underlying belief is still very much intact. And that is why people feel like they're in a constant battle against themselves. Now I want to bring you back to something really important, because earlier I said addiction is made up of 3 systems: subconscious beliefs, neural pathways, and nervous system regulation. So let's now connect this to the emotional layer, because every time you drink, to change how you feel, you are teaching your nervous system something very important. You are teaching it this state is too much to handle. Stress is too much, anxiety is too much, loneliness is too much, boredom is too much. So your nervous system quickly learns to escalate quickly into protection mode, fight or flight. And then alcohol becomes the shortcut to get out of that state. So now you have a loop that looks like this: trigger, nervous system activation, discomfort, prediction relief, drinking, temporary relief, and then the reinforcement of that pathway. And every time that loop repeats, it strengthens, not just behaviourally, but biologically, emotionally, neurologically. And this is why people often say things like, it just feels automatic. It feels like I switch into someone else. It feels like I lose control. Because in that moment, you are not operating from your conscious mind. You are operating from a stored survival pattern. Now I want to pause here and make something very clear. This is not permanent. This is not fixed. And this is not your identity. Because every single part of this loop was learned. And anything learned by the brain can be unlearned. It can be changed, but it requires something very different to what most people are doing. It requires changing the meaning your brain is assigning to alcohol. It requires building new neural pathways through repeated experience. And it requires teaching your nervous system that it's safe without the substance that it's been relying on. And that is exactly where the reframe, rewire, reset method comes in. But before I go into that in full detail, I want to address something important, because I know what some of you are thinking right now. You don't understand my situation. I have trauma, I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I have the alcoholic gene. I've tried before, I failed before. And I want to say this clearly, none of those things disqualify you from changing. They can explain why your system learned what it learned. They do not define what is possible next, because the brain is not static, it is adaptive, which means it is always changing based on input. And if alcohol is one of the strongest inputs your brain has learned, then removing the pattern is not about force. It's about retraining. It's about rewiring. And that's exactly what my method does, by changing the meaning, response, and internal state regulation, so that alcohol stops being a solution at all. And when that happens, the desire doesn't need to be fought anymore. It simply fades. This is why I created Reframe, Rewire, Reset and the CLEAR framework. It has 3 stages, and each stage is designed to undo the exact system that created the drinking pattern in the first place, not by fighting it, but by reversing it. So the first stage is reframe. Right now, your brain has assigned meaning to alcohol, and that meaning usually sounds like, it helps me relax, it helps me switch off, it helps me feel confident, it helps me sleep, it helps with my social anxiety, it helps me socialize. But here's something most people never stop to question. What if none of that is actually true? Not emotionally true, not habitually true, but biologically true. Because alcohol is not solving stress in your nervous system. It's temporarily numbing it. And your brain mistakes that numbing for relief. So over time it learns, when I feel like this, I drink. And that becomes automatic programming. So in this first stage, we do something very simple but very powerful. We begin to deconstruct the belief that alcohol is serving you. And by doing this, we devalue alcohol. We take it off its pedestal. We take away what you've learned through family dynamics, society, and culture. Not by force, not by shame, but by awareness. Because once the brain sees the truth clearly, it starts to update its prediction system. And prediction is everything. Your brain is not designed to be accurate. It is designed to be efficient. It predicts what you need based on what you've done before. So if alcohol has been reused repeatedly, your brain predicts alcohol again, even when it no longer makes sense, even when it creates problems, even when you regret it. Most people think they are choosing to drink, but what's actually happening is much deeper. The subconscious mind is running the pattern, and the subconscious mind, remember, controls 95% of your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviours, which means most of the time you are not deciding. You are following a program, and that program was built over time through repetition, emotion, environment, and survival-based learning. So the first step to change is not stopping drinking. It's changing what alcohol means to your brain. Because once meaning changes, desire changes. We do this by using the CLEAR framework. This essentially puts your thoughts and beliefs under a microscope, so you can see what's true and what's not. And you then decide what you want to believe based on what you learn inside the program. Now, I want to be very clear about something very important. This method does not require perfection. I do not require you to be alcohol-free to begin. In fact, in the beginning, I prefer that you are still drinking if that's where you're at now, because we are not using willpower. We are observing patterns. We are collecting data. We are breaking unconscious association loops. And that cannot happen if you're fighting yourself. So instead, we replace judgment with curiosity. And that is where real change begins. Once the brain begins to question the meaning of alcohol, we move into the second stage, rewiring, where you test out the waters by removing alcohol. You don't have to be perfect. This is just to test out the waters and get curious to see what programs are still running. Don't worry, by this stage, your desire has shifted and you will not be relying on willpower. The real system underneath it all is the neural pathway that's being created. Every repeated behaviour strengthens a pathway in the brain, and over time that pathway has become automatic, like a road, then a highway, then a superhighway, until eventually it becomes the default route your brain takes under stress. So in the next stage, we begin weakening that pathway, not by force, but by interruption, awareness, pattern breaking, and repetition of new responses, by implementing new practices and behaviours. Because the brain is always changing. The question is not, can the brain change? The question is, what is it currently being trained to repeat? And this is where things start to get interesting. Because once you begin rewiring the behaviour, you start to notice something deeper underneath it. The emotional system, the nervous system response, the feeling state that drives the urge in the first place. And that is where stage 3 comes in, reset. Because even if you change thoughts, even if you change habits, if your nervous system is still stuck in stress, overload, or shutdown, the craving will still activate. So next, we regulate the system that created the urge itself. Before we go there, I want to pause for a moment, because this is the point most people start to realize something really important. They don't actually want alcohol. They want relief. They want calm. They want escape from internal pressure. And alcohol just happened to become the tool. But it is definitely not the only tool, and it is not the solution. It is a learned shortcut. And shortcuts can be unlearned. So now we come to the final stage, and this is where everything either stabilizes or it keeps repeating. Because even if you change your thoughts, even if you understand patterns, even if you start rewiring behaviors, there is still one deeper layer running beneath everything: your nervous system state. And this is what most people never get taught. You don't drink because alcohol is powerful. You drink because your internal state becomes unbearable, because it becomes too uncomfortable. Stress, anxiety, overwhelm, shutdown, restlessness. And in those moments, your brain is not looking for truth. It is looking for relief, fast relief, predictable relief, familiar relief. And alcohol is being coded as that shortcut, not because it actually regulates you long term, but because it temporarily shifts your state. So the brain learns this works, even when it doesn't, even when it causes more stress later, even when it repeats the cycle. And this is something almost no one explains clearly. Cravings are not random. They are not weakness. They are not a moral failure. They are a nervous system prediction. Your body enters a state it has previously associated with drinking, and the brain predicts. We solve this with alcohol. So the craving is not desire, it is prediction. And if you change the state, you change the prediction. Most relapses don't happen because someone forgot their goals. It happens because of emotional overload, a trigger, a stress response, a moment of emotional intensity. And in that moment, the nervous system takes over. Not logic, not intention, not motivation. So what we do in this final stage is not try harder. We build a new internal baseline, a regulated system, where the body learns, I can feel this and not escape. That is real freedom. Not suppression, not avoidance, not control, but regulation. But most importantly, we keep working on the subconscious drivers, causing the thoughts and emotions that are triggering this nervous system dysregulation, using my signature CLEAR framework. Let me tell you about someone who went through my online program. We'll call her Amanda. Amanda had been drinking for over 20 years. On the outside, she looked functional. She worked. She raised her daughter. She managed life. But inside, she was constantly cycling between anxiety and depression. And alcohol became her reset button. Stress, drink. Emotional pressure, drink. Hard day, drink. Overthinking, drink. Numb out, repeat. Everything eventually collapsed. She lost her job after a drink driving incident. And for the first time in her life, she was forced into structured recovery. She went to AA, she did therapy. She followed everything she was told. But instead of feeling better, she felt worse, because now she didn't just feel stressed. She felt broken, labelled, like she was fighting for herself every single day. And even when she stopped drinking for a period, it wasn't freedom, it was suppression, white knuckling, counting days, fighting urges, avoiding triggers, living in fear of relapse. That is not recovery, that is containment. Then she came across one of my videos explaining my method. And at first she was skeptical, because she had already tried everything else, but something was different. She wasn't told you are powerless. She wasn't told you have a disease. She wasn't told you will struggle forever. Instead, she was shown something simple, that her brain had learned a pattern, and anything learned can be unlearned, not through force, but through repetition of a new system. Reframe, rewire, reset. In the beginning, nothing dramatic happened. No instant transformation, no magical overnight shift. But within weeks, something subtle started changing. She stopped seeing alcohol as a solution. Then she started noticing urges differently, not acting on autopilot. She began pausing, observing, understanding, and then something even deeper shifted. Her emotional state stopped feeling like something she needed to escape. She started regulating instead of reacting, and quickly the pattern collapsed, not because she was resisting it, but because she no longer needed it. And that is the key difference. You are not broken, you are not missing something, you are not weak. You are running a learned system, a system built from meaning, repetition, and emotion, a survival-based prediction. And the moment that system changes, the behaviour changes with it, not through effort, but through removal of necessity. So if you take anything from this masterclass, take this. Willpower is not the solution. It never was, it never will be. It is the last resort of a system that hasn't been reprogrammed yet. Real change happens when the belief changes, the pathway changes, the nervous system learns safety without escape. And when those three align, alcohol stops being a need. It becomes irrelevant. Now I want you to imagine two versions of your life, not in fantasy, but in probability. In one version, nothing changes. You keep managing it. You keep negotiating with yourself. You keep having day one. You keep feeling the pull, the regret, the cycle, and the quiet internal promise. Next time will be different. But it keeps repeating because nothing underneath has changed. Now imagine another version. Same life, same responsibilities, same stress, same alcohol-fueled society. But something internal is different. Alcohol no longer feels like an answer. It stops entering your decision making in the same way. You don't fight it, you don't crave it, you don't negotiate with it, and you don't avoid life. It just loses relevance, and you feel more present, more stable, more in control of your internal state than ever. This is not motivation. That is rewiring, and that is exactly what I teach inside my program. Reframe, Rewire, Reset is a structured 60-day process designed to take you through exactly what I've covered here. A practical step-by-step system. Inside, you'll learn how to reframe the meaning your brain has attached to alcohol, rewire the automatic neural pathways that are driving the habit, and reset your nervous system so you're no longer reacting from survival mode. 60 days, 60 lessons. You can read or listen in audio depending on how you like to learn. Alongside that, you get a printable 60-day workbook and the clear manual for changing limiting beliefs. There's hypnosis and meditation recording to really speed things up, and a private community for support. You will understand exactly how to actually apply this in real life, not just understand it. Because understanding alone doesn't create change. If it did, all those podcasts you've been listening to, all those books you've been reading, all of my videos you've been watching, they would have got you sober. But they didn't, did they? Because you're here. No amount of learning creates change. Implementation does. Action does. Now, I want to be clear, you don't need my program to change your life. You could go down the path I went down 9 years ago and study addiction, the brain, the nervous system, psychology and human behaviour, habit change, trauma and hypnosis, or you could skip years of in-depth study and trial and error like I had to. Start with a proven system, because if everything you've tried so far hasn't worked long term, then the question becomes not, do I understand this, but am I willing to do something different? Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And if something does change, everything can. You are not stuck, you are not broken. You are simply running a pattern your brain once learned, and it's now ready to unlearn. The only question is whether you're ready to begin that process. But before we wrap things up, I want to bring everything back to one simple moment. Not information, not theory, not even understanding, a decision. Because right now there are only two paths in front of you, and one of them you're already very familiar with. Path 1. In this path you go back to your normal life, and for a few days, maybe even a week, you might feel motivated. You tell yourself, I'm really ready to sort this out. I'm going to slow down. This week will be different. And maybe it is for a little while. But then stress hits, or emotion builds, or life gets overwhelming, and your brain does what it's always done. It reaches for the same solution. Not because you want to fail, but because it's the only pattern it knows in that moment. And then afterwards comes the familiar cycle, the regret, the disappointment, the why do I keep doing this, the promise to start again. And slowly, without noticing it, time passes. Weeks become months, months become years, and the pattern doesn't get weaker. It gets more automatic, it gets stronger, more embedded, more normalized, until one day you realize you are still thinking about the same thing you were thinking about all those years ago, just with more exhaustion added to it. Now I want you to imagine something different, not perfect, not fantasy, just different. In this path, you stop trying to fight yourself. You stop relying on willpower. You stop waking up every day trying to be stronger. Instead, you start actually understanding what is happening inside your brain. You start seeing this as a pattern, not an identity, and slowly something begins to shift. Not all at once, but in daily moments. A craving shows up and it passes differently. A trigger hits and you don't react the same way. A stressful day happens and your brain doesn't automatically say drink, because the meaning has changed. The wiring has changed. And your nervous system is no longer stuck in that survival loop. And very quickly, something very quiet happens. Alcohol stops feeling like a decision you are constantly negotiating with yourself about, and starts becoming something else entirely different. It becomes small and irrelevant. And this is the part I really need you to hear, because most people don't fail because they don't know what to do. They fail because they keep trying to use the same system that created the problem to also fix it. Willpower, restriction, white knuckling, guilt, shame, trying harder, starting over. And if that worked, you wouldn't be here right now. There is nothing wrong with you. There is no missing piece. There is no broken part of you that needs fixing. There is a learned pattern, and patterns can be changed by understanding them and reprogramming them at the source. So I want to make this incredibly simple for you. Not complicated, not overwhelming, just honest. If you keep doing what you've always done, you already know what that outcome looks like. You've lived it, you've felt it. You don't need more proof of it. But if you're even slightly curious about what your life could look like if this pattern stopped controlling you, then this is the moment where something different needs to happen. Not later, not when it gets worse, not when you finally hit enough motivation or you hit rock bottom. Now. Inside my program, I walk you through step by step exactly what I've spoken about here. You get the full system to change the meaning of alcohol in your brain, to rewire the automatic neural loop, and tools to regulate your nervous system and process emotional triggers in real time. Actual guided processes. So you're not guessing or trying to figure things out. It's not about motivation, it's about structure. It's about having a framework. because structure is what replaces willpower. So I want to ask you one final question. If nothing changes, where will you be in 12 months from now? Still thinking about it? Still trying? Still restarting? Still hoping this time something clicks? And now ask yourself the opposite. If something does change, if this pattern actually starts to break, if alcohol starts to lose control over your thoughts, what could your life feel like then? Free? A quiet mind? Without alcohol being a constant thought? Clear, stable, motivated, energized, capable of making choices that actually add to your life. At some point, every person reaches a moment where they realize, I can't keep going like this. And when that moment comes, you either repeat the cycle again or you choose a different system. That choice is yours, but the opportunity is here. It's right in front of you. But before you decide anything, I want to talk about something most people avoid thinking about, not because they're lazy, but because it's uncomfortable. That's the real cost of staying where you are. Because every decision has a cost. Staying the same has a cost. And changing has a cost. But only one of them quietly compounds over time. Because when people think about alcohol, they usually only think about the short-term cost. A bad night, a hangover, a regret, maybe a lost day. But the real cost is much deeper than that. It's not just the drink. It's everything that comes with it over time. The mental space it takes up, the negotiations you have with yourself, the anxiety and the regret after drinking, the energy it drains from your relationships, the way it quietly reduces your trust in yourself, slowly destroying your confidence, the way you start to distrust your own promises when you said you wouldn't drink again. And then it happens again. That erosion of self-trust, that is one of the higher costs here. Because once you stop trusting yourself, everything becomes harder. And if you zoom out even further, the cost isn't just emotional, it's financial too. How much has alcohol already cost you? How much will it cost over the years to come? Not just the drink itself, the nights out, the extra food, the impulsive spending, the lost productivity, the opportunities you didn't show up for fully, the days you weren't at your best, all the memories that should have been made. Multiply that by weeks, then months, then years. And for many people, it quietly becomes thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars over time. But even that is not the biggest cost, because the real cost isn't just money, it's potential, it's presence, it's peace of mind, it's waking up without negotiating with yourself. It's not having alcohol take up space in your mind every single day. It's being fully in your life, not half in it. And the hardest part is most people don't notice what it's really costing until they step out of it. Only then do they realize how heavy it actually was. Now, I also want to be honest with you about something important. Yes, this program is not free. There is a cost to it. And I want to say that clearly without hiding it or avoiding it. But I want you to hold that cost next to something else. Because the question is not, can I afford this program? The real question is, what is staying the same costing you if nothing changes? Because if alcohol is costing you energy, your clarity, your confidence, your relationships, your sense of control, then the real investment is not just financial. It's emotional, it's psychological. It's your life experience over time. And here's something I've learned working with people going through this process. Change doesn't happen from information alone. It happens from commitment, a real decision point, a moment where you stop trying to figure it out later and you decide, I'm done with how this has been affecting my life. Not because you're broken, but because you're ready for something different. And I want you to think about this clearly. If alcohol has been costing you your peace of mind, your confidence, your emotional stability, then investing into a structured way out of that pattern is not really an expense. It's a redirection. Because either way, you are paying. The other with time, energy, emotional pressure, and years of your life experience. And as far as we know, you only get one life. And this is where everything becomes very simple. At some point you reach a line where you realize, I've already paid enough for this pattern. The only question left is, do I want to keep paying it? Or do I want to change the system that's creating it? And if you're at that point where you're even considering that question, then you already know something has to change. You don't need more information. You don't need more research. You don't need more trying on your own. You need a system that actually addresses what is driving the pattern. And that is exactly what I've built. I hope you walk away from this masterclass with a sense of hope and excitement about the life that's waiting for you, the life you can have. And I know you can, because hundreds before you have walked this exact path, asking the same question, should I join up? Shouldn't I join up? And the ones that did now have the life they dreamed of. And you can too. So if you're ready to change your life, you should have received an email with a link to join up, or you can just go to www.rewiredrecovery.co. Payment plans are available and everything is online, so you can join from anywhere in the world, and the price automatically converts at checkout. I truly hope you decide to join, because you bloody deserve it. And if nobody told you lately, you are worth it. I want to thank you for your time, and I truly hope that I see you in the program. Bye for now.